On a crisp autumn morning in the small town of Fair Hill, Montana, the air was cool and sharp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke. Daniel Brooks, a quiet man in his late 30s, balanced a heavy bag of carpentry supplies over his shoulder as he walked down the cracked sidewalk. His face, weathered and calm, rarely betrayed the turmoil he carried inside. He was used to keeping to himself, working with his hands, and letting the world pass by without much fuss. That morning, something unusual stopped him cold. A woman's voice, barely more than a whisper, yet urgent and trembling, called out to him. "Sir, can you pretend to be my husband? Just for today?" Daniel turned slowly to see Claire Evans standing behind him. She looked like someone who had been running for days, her clothes worn and her coat threadbare. Her hands gripped a small backpack, the straps wrapped tightly around her fingers as if holding onto the last piece of safety she could find. Her eyes, wild with fear but fierce with determination, locked onto his. Across the street, a black government sedan sat parked like a predator waiting for its prey. A man in a dark trench coat stood nearby, his clipboard in hand, scanning the scene with cold precision. Daniel followed Claire's gaze and saw the man's eyes sweeping over the sidewalk as if he already knew what was about to happen. Daniel was no stranger to fear himself. In a town like Fair Hill, where most people kept their distance, he had learned to watch the shadows but never let them swallow him. He hesitated, unsure if this was his fight. He was just a carpenter, a quiet black man in a mostly white town, easy to overlook, easy to forget. But there was something in Claire's eyes, a desperate hope and a mother's fierce love that made him step closer. "Take my arm," Daniel said quietly, offering the small comfort of a steady presence. Claire hesitated for only a moment before leaning lightly into him, her body trembling less as she let him guide her. Together they crossed the street like an ordinary family, shoulders brushing, walking in step. It was a simple gesture, but it transformed them from strangers to partners, a shield against the watchful eyes waiting across the road. As they reached the safety of the other side, Daniel's heart raced, not from the weight of his supplies, but from the unspoken truth settling between them. This wasn't just a favor. It was a moment that would change everything. Claire whispered, her voice raw with emotion, "If that man sees me alone again, he'll take Lily away. Please, just for today." Daniel nodded, his gaze hardening with quiet resolve. He didn't know her story yet, but he understood the weight of that plea. Sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can save a life. This was one of those moments. If you believe in standing up for what's right, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts with us. Together, we can remind the world that kindness still matters. Daniel led Claire and Lily away from the bustling streets of Fair Hill, the weight of the morning's urgency still thick in the air. The steady crunch of fallen leaves underfoot was the only sound as they walked toward the parking lot where Daniel's old red truck waited. The chill of autumn seemed to seep into Claire's bones, but she kept her gaze fixed ahead, eyes sharp and determined despite the exhaustion that tugged at her. Once inside the truck, with Lily curled quietly on the passenger seat clutching her worn stuffed elephant, Claire finally began to speak, her voice low but steady. "Victor Langston," she said. "He's Lily's great-uncle, rich, connected, dangerous." She paused, swallowing hard. "He doesn't want custody because he cares about Lily. He wants it because he wants to win, to control me, to punish me." Daniel glanced over, searching her face for any sign of exaggeration. But the truth was clear in her eyes, the haunted look of someone who'd been fighting a battle no one else could see. "He's using forged records," she continued, "bribing officials, manipulating the system to make me look unstable. Every welfare check is a trap, every phone call a threat." The words settled between them, heavy and cold. Daniel, who had lived a life of quiet routine, found himself caught in a storm far beyond the woods he carved. The idea of getting involved was terrifying. He had no legal training, no allies in town, just his hands, his silence, and a steady heart. But when Lily reached out her tiny hand to grip his, Daniel felt something shift inside him. This was no longer someone else's fight. It was now his too. Driving away from the town, Daniel took them to his cabin, a simple but sturdy refuge nestled deep in the Montana mountains. The narrow dirt road wound through tall pines and golden aspens, leading them far from prying eyes and the cold grip of Victor's influence. Inside, the cabin smelled of cedar and old wood, the soft crackle of a fire warming the hearth. Daniel set down their bags and offered a quiet welcome. Claire sank into a worn chair, relief mingling with exhaustion on her face. Over the next few days, the true reach of Victor's power became clear. There were sudden visits from government agents conducting welfare checks, officials questioning Claire's fitness as a mother, and piles of forged documents aimed at discrediting her. The more she resisted, the more relentless Victor's tactics became. One evening, sitting by the fire, Claire confided to Daniel, her voice barely above a whisper. "I once filed a complaint against him for emotional abuse, but he silenced me. Paid off therapists, threatened witnesses, everyone who tried to help vanished." Daniel listened, the quiet strength in her words stirring something fierce within him. He had buried his own ghosts in the mountains, but now those ghosts seemed ready to rise again, to fight alongside him. His peaceful life, once marked by the steady rhythm of hammer on wood, was now tangled with Claire's desperate struggle. He realized that Victor Langston was a man who would stop at nothing. Not for justice, not for family, but for power. And Daniel knew that if he was going to protect Claire and Lily, he would have to stand against a storm far bigger than himself. Yet, amidst the growing darkness, a small light flickered. The chance to fight back, not with weapons, but with courage, kindness, and an unyielding will to protect what was right. For Daniel, Claire, and Lily, this was no longer just a borrowed day. It was the beginning of a battle for their very lives. The cabin's wooden walls seemed to hold their breath as Daniel and Claire began to pull their lives back together, piece by fragile piece. But the battle was far from over. They needed more than courage. They needed proof, evidence strong enough to pierce through Victor Langston's web of lies and corruption. One cold morning, Nora Mitchell arrived at the cabin. Nora was a small woman with sharp eyes and a voice that carried the weight of someone who had seen too much but refused to look away. Years ago, she had been Lily's daycare provider, the first to notice the bruises hidden beneath the girl's sleeves. She had reported them, only to face warnings and threats from Victor's men. But Nora's conscience had won out, and now she was ready to stand by Claire and Daniel. Sitting around the rough-hewn table, Nora laid out what she knew. "I filed the report," she said quietly, "but it got buried. People are scared. Victor's money reaches places most folks wouldn't even dream of. But I'm here now. I'm ready to speak out, and I'll back up everything with what I remember." Claire's eyes glistened with hope for the first time in weeks. "Thank you," she whispered, reaching out to squeeze Nora's hand. With Nora's testimony, Daniel and Claire knew they needed legal guidance. Their search led them to Judge Margaret Hale, a retired jurist known in Fairhill for her sharp mind and unwavering integrity. Though retired, Judge Hale still held respect in legal circles, and more importantly, she believed their story. In the judge's modest office, with walls lined by books and the scent of old paper thick in the air, Claire recounted her ordeal. Judge Hale listened without interruption, her gaze steady and thoughtful. "Victor Langston is a man who plays the game with shadows," the judge said after a pause. "But the law still has teeth if you know how to use them. You will need witnesses, documentation, and above all, patience." She handed them a list of steps: gather medical records, find anyone who had seen Victor's abuse, file for protective orders, and prepare for the inevitable custody battle. Meanwhile, the truth began to crack through the veil of Victor's influence. Agent Denise Carter, a sharp and relentless investigator from Child Protection Special Investigations, started digging into Victor's finances and actions. She was the kind of person who didn't flinch in the face of intimidation, a beacon of hope amid the darkness. Denise uncovered evidence of bribery and forged documents designed to sway the courts and paint Claire as an unfit mother. Victor's web was wide, but she was determined to unravel it thread by thread. Yet Victor was no passive opponent. His tactics became more aggressive. He filed an emergency custody order claiming Claire was neglectful. Edited photographs were sent to authorities, portraying Claire as disheveled and unstable. The most chilling act came one night when a shadowy figure lurked near the cabin, meant to send a message: fear. Inside the cabin, the tension was palpable. But Daniel remained a pillar of quiet strength. Despite the growing threats, he was Lily's protector in every way that mattered. He fixed broken toys with meticulous care, cooked warm breakfasts that filled the chilly kitchen with comforting aromas, and was there whenever Lily needed a steady hand or a kind smile. Claire watched him from the doorway one morning. the soft light filtering through the window casting a gentle glow around him. "You don't have to do this alone," she said softly. Daniel looked up, his eyes tired but unwavering. "I'm not alone, not anymore." The days grew heavier with uncertainty, but so did their resolve. Together, with Nora's courage, Judge Hale's wisdom, and Agent Carter's determination, they built a fragile fortress against the storm. Though fear lurked like a shadow just beyond the trees, inside that cabin, kindness and courage burned bright. For Daniel, Claire, and Lily, the battle was far from over. But with each passing day, they proved that even the quietest voice can grow loud enough to break through the darkest lies. The weight of their situation pressed heavily on Daniel's shoulders, but he never let it show. Each morning, before dawn broke over the mountain pines, he rose quietly, careful not to wake Claire or Lily. He brewed strong coffee, the bitter aroma filling the cabin's small kitchen, and set about preparing a simple breakfast. Eggs scrambled with wild herbs he foraged himself, warm bread toasted over the fire. These small acts, humble as they were, became a sanctuary of normalcy in a world spinning out of control. Claire often sat at the wooden table, her hands trembling as she sifted through a growing pile of papers, legal documents, photographs, messages, and notes. Every piece, a fragment of truth they hoped would pierce the veil of deception cast by Victor Langston. She was exhausted, but every day she fought to keep her spirit alive, for Lily's sake. Sometimes, Daniel would reach out and take her hand, a silent reminder that she was not alone. The arrival of Nora Mitchell had been a quiet turning point. Nora's courage shone through her steady voice and unwavering eyes. She spoke not only of bruises Lily bore, but of the subtle ways Victor's control had seeped into their lives, the whispered threats, the manipulation of neighbors, even the betrayal of friends too afraid to stand up. Nora's testimony gave Claire strength, a tangible thread to hold onto amid the storm. Judge Margaret Hale's involvement brought a sense of legitimacy and hope. Though retired, her presence commanded respect, and her clear-eyed belief in their story rekindled a flame Claire thought had long died out. The judge's words were not promises, but they were a roadmap through the legal labyrinth, a guide to fighting a man who wielded power like a weapon. Yet, the harsh realities of their fight were undeniable. Victor Langston was relentless. The emergency custody order came suddenly, a brutal legal strike aimed to strip Claire of her rights without warning. Daniel watched as Claire's face paled reading the documents, the system stacked heavily against them. But even as Victor edited photos and spread falsehoods, Daniel stood firm. He refused to let fear dictate their lives. Nights were the hardest. The darkness beyond the cabin seemed to pulse with unseen threats. One evening, Daniel found footprints near the back door, fresh and heavy, a silent warning left in the soil. Instead of panic, a cold determination settled in him. He secured the cabin, checked his tools, and sat quietly beside Claire and Lily, whispering reassurances neither quite believed but both desperately needed to hear. In those moments, Daniel became more than a carpenter or a stranger. He became the protector, the steady hand in a world that threatened to unravel them. His presence brought a fragile sense of safety, and to Lily, he was a source of gentle comfort, a man who mended broken things, who carved wooden toys shaped like animals, who smiled warmly even when the weight of the world seemed too much. Claire saw the transformation too. In Daniel's quiet acts of kindness, preparing meals, repairing a broken chair, soothing Lily's tears, she found a refuge from the chaos. She began to let down her guard, allowing herself to hope again, to imagine a life where they could be safe, where Lily could grow without fear. But beneath the calm, the storm brewed. Victor's influence crept ever closer, casting long shadows over their days. The legal battles loomed, with every court date bringing new challenges and threats. Friends they once trusted grew distant, afraid to cross a man with money and power. And yet, in the heart of that small cabin, amidst the crackling fire and whispered promises, Daniel and Claire forged a bond stronger than fear, a bond rooted in courage, compassion, and the unyielding fight to protect the innocent. As the days stretched on, Daniel realized that this fight was bigger than any of them. A fight not just for custody, but for dignity, justice, and the belief that even the quietest voices deserve to be heard. And though the road ahead was uncertain, they faced it together, holding on to the hope that kindness and truth could still prevail in a world too often shadowed by cruelty. The courtroom was hushed, the air thick with tension, as Victor Langston's lawyer rose to speak. He was a man polished and practiced in the art of dismantling reputations, his voice smooth but cold. His target was clear: Claire Evans. He sought to paint her as unstable, reckless, and unfit to raise Lily. Worse, he accused Daniel Brooks of manipulating Claire, suggesting that Daniel's quiet demeanor masked a darker influence. But Claire sat tall, her eyes unwavering as she listened. The accusations stung, but they could not break the shield of truth she carried inside. Their attorney, Janice Rowe, was a stark contrast, calm, composed, and fiercely determined. She methodically presented evidence that told a story far different from Victor's claims. Medical records detailed bruises and injuries Lily had suffered. School reports showed a child thriving under Claire's care despite the odds. And then came the voicemail. A chilling recording of Victor's angry threats and manipulation, a raw piece of the puzzle that no fabrication could erase. When it was Daniel's turn, he stood slowly, his voice steady but filled with quiet authority. "A child shouldn't have to wait outside a locked school door for a father who never comes," he said, his words resonating through the courtroom. "I was there for Lily when no one else showed up. I did what any father or any man who cares should do." The judge, Margaret Hale, listened intently, her eyes reflecting a mix of stern justice and compassion. After hours of testimony, cross-examination, and careful deliberation, the verdict was clear. Full custody of Lily was granted to Claire. Victor Langston was formally censured for his misconduct. His attempts to manipulate the legal system and intimidate a mother fighting for her child laid bare for all to see. For a moment, relief washed over the room like a long-awaited dawn. But the story did not end there. Weeks later, as Daniel, Claire, and Lily began to rebuild their lives with a fragile sense of safety, new evidence surfaced. Shadows lurking behind the courtroom's polished veneer. Agent Denise Carter's investigation uncovered shocking proof that Victor had bribed a judge. The very system meant to protect justice had been compromised. This revelation sent ripples through the community and the courts. Agent Carter moved swiftly, building a criminal case against Victor Langston, charging him with bribery, fraud, and witness intimidation. The fight was escalating from custody battles to criminal justice. But Victor was desperate. Knowing his empire was crumbling, he hired Marcus Denton, a disgraced ex-Marine with a reputation for intimidation and violence. Marcus was a shadow looming over their every step, a menace that forced Claire, Lily, and Daniel to make a harrowing decision. For their safety, they had to leave their mountain refuge. Packing their belongings into Daniel's truck once again, they set out toward an unknown future, their hearts heavy but their resolve unbroken. The journey was uncertain, the dangers real, but united by love and courage, they refused to let fear dictate their lives. As the wheels rolled forward, Daniel glanced at Claire and Lily, his family now in every sense that mattered. They were no longer running, they were fighting. And in that fight, they found strength they never knew they had. The courtroom was more than just a room. It was the battleground where Claire's future and Lily's safety would be decided. Victor Langston's lawyer, a man who wore his confidence like armor, paced slowly as he laid out his assault. With every carefully chosen word, he sought to unravel Claire's credibility. He painted her as unstable, reckless, someone prone to poor judgment. More insidiously, he claimed Daniel Brooks was manipulating her, casting doubt on the quiet carpenter's intentions. The suggestion was clear. Daniel wasn't the protector he appeared to be, but rather a shadowy figure pulling strings behind the scenes. Claire's heart pounded as she sat through the accusations, each one a blow, yet her resolve did not waver. She knew the truth was on her side, even if the courtroom audience did not yet see it. Daniel's presence beside her was steady, his calm strength a silent promise that they were in this fight together. Then, Janice Rowe took the floor. Unlike Victor's lawyer, Janice's voice was measured but unyielding. She laid out the evidence piece by piece. Medical records detailing bruises and injuries that had been dismissed or ignored, school reports showing Lily's remarkable resilience and progress despite the trauma she'd endured, and then, most damning of all, a voicemail from Victor himself. In it, his voice was laced with anger and threats, a chilling reminder of the man's true nature. The room fell silent when Daniel was called to testify. He rose slowly, his tall frame commanding quiet attention. His voice, when it came, was firm and filled with quiet dignity. "A child shouldn't have to wait outside a locked school door for a father who never shows up," he said. "I was there for Lily when no one else was. I did what any parent or any person with a heart would do." His words hung in the air, carrying a weight far beyond the courtroom walls. Judge Margaret Hale, known for her fairness and wisdom, listened closely. Her eyes, sharp yet compassionate, reflected the burden of the decision before her. After hours of testimony and deliberation, she delivered the verdict. Full custody of Lily was awarded to Claire. Victor Langston was formally censured for his misconduct. The judge condemned his attempts to manipulate the justice system and intimidate a mother fighting to protect her child. It was a victory, a light breaking through the shadows. But as the courtroom emptied, the real battle was just beginning. Behind closed doors, Agent Denise Carter continued her investigation. What she uncovered shook the foundation of the very system that had just delivered justice. Evidence surfaced that Victor had bribed a judge, one whose ruling had nearly tipped the scales in his favor. This revelation was a stark reminder that power and corruption still lurked in the shadows. Agent Carter worked tirelessly to build a criminal case against Victor Langston, charging him with bribery, fraud, and witness intimidation. The stakes had escalated from a custody battle to a fight against systemic corruption. Victor's desperation grew. Facing the collapse of his empire, he hired Marcus Denton, a disgraced ex-Marine notorious for his ruthless tactics. Marcus became a looming threat, a dark shadow stalking Daniel, Claire, and Lily. His presence was a constant reminder that danger was never far behind. One evening, as the wind whispered through the pines, Daniel found footprints near the cabin's back door, fresh and heavy. It was a silent warning, a message meant to intimidate. But instead of fear, Daniel felt a fierce resolve harden within him. The family made a difficult choice. For their safety, they would leave the cabin, their refuge, their sanctuary. They packed what they could, the weight of uncertainty heavy but their spirits unbroken. Driving away from the mountains, Daniel glanced at Claire and Lily. In that moment, surrounded by the fading light and the steady hum of the truck, he realized that they were no longer just survivors. They were fighters. Bound by love and courage, they faced an uncertain future, but together. Their journey was far from over, but one truth remained clear. No matter the darkness ahead, kindness, strength, and unwavering hope would guide them through. Far from the shadows of their past life, nestled deep in the remote wilderness, Daniel, Claire, and Lily arrived at an old ranger station that would become their new sanctuary. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of pine and fresh earth, the kind of place where time slowed and worries seemed to lose their sharp edges. Here, away from the city's prying eyes and Victor Langston's relentless reach, they began to rebuild what had been broken. The station was simple, a sturdy log cabin with a wraparound porch overlooking a tranquil lake, its surface shimmering softly beneath the morning mist. Inside, the warmth of the fireplace chased away the chill of dawn, and the small kitchen filled with the comforting smells of breakfast cooking on a wood stove. Life here was different. It was peaceful, but fragile. Daniel took on the role of teacher and caretaker, patiently helping Lily with her lessons and carving toys to keep her laughter ringing through the cabin. Claire found moments to breathe, her smile returning bit by bit as she cooked meals and shared quiet evenings by the fire. They lived like a real family, bound not by blood but by the unspoken promises they made to protect one another. Yet even in this quiet refuge, the past lingered. One afternoon, Agent Denise Carter visited, her expression serious but reassuring. She laid out the facts with no sugarcoating. Victor's power network was deep and dangerous. Though charges were being prepared against him for bribery and fraud, the man he had hired to intimidate them was still out there, a ghost in the shadows. "We're doing everything we can," Agent Carter assured them, "but you need to stay vigilant." Days turned into weeks, and the tension slowly eased as they found strength in their shared resilience. Mornings began with the soft sounds of Lily's laughter echoing outside as she chased butterflies barefoot in the dew-soaked grass. Daniel's hands, once calloused from years of carpentry, now built a swing for Lily, while Claire tended a small garden patch, coaxing life from the soil. One misty morning, as the fog rose gently from the lake like a silver curtain, Claire stood on the porch, wrapped in a warm shawl, watching the world awaken. Her eyes rested on the distant tree line, the soft light filtering through the haze, and she whispered aloud, more to herself than anyone else, "Is it really over?" Daniel joined her quietly, his presence steady beside hers. He looked out over the misty water and replied with a calm certainty, "Not yet, but we're ready now." Lily suddenly appeared, running barefoot across the porch with a wooden toy car in her hands, the latest creation Daniel had carved just for her. Her giggles filled the morning air, pure and unburdened. Claire watched her daughter, feeling a swell of hope rise within her chest. It wasn't that the danger had vanished, it was that they were no longer alone in facing it. They had each other. That fragile peace, built on trust, kindness, and courage, was enough to light the way forward. As the sun climbed higher, casting warm, golden rays through the trees, Claire turned back to Daniel and Lily, the weight of uncertainty still there, but softened by the strength they found together. Sometimes, she thought, all it takes is standing by someone for just one day to change both your lives forever. And in that moment, surrounded by the quiet beauty of the wilderness and the gentle rhythms of their new life, she believed that kindness, true, unwavering kindness, could indeed defeat injustice. Claire's gaze softened as she watched Daniel build another wooden toy for Lily, his hands steady and sure despite the trials they'd faced. It was more than craftsmanship. It was an act of love, a tangible reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope could be carved from the roughest pieces of life. She realized that their story wasn't just about survival. It was about the small miracles born from everyday kindness. The days at the ranger station unfolded with a delicate grace. Mornings were spent gathering eggs from the small coop Daniel had set up, afternoons filled with lessons under towering pines, and evenings warmed by stories shared around the crackling fire. Lily's laughter became the soundtrack of their healing, a light that chased away the shadows lingering at the edges of their hearts. But peace, they all knew, was fragile. Agent Carter's warning echoed in Claire's mind. Victor's reach was far, and his hired threats were still out there, hidden in the unknown. Yet for the first time in a long time, fear did not dominate their days. Instead, they chose courage. One afternoon, as Claire tended the garden, she thought about how far they'd come. From desperate pleas on a crowded street to this quiet sanctuary, their journey had been marked by the kindness of strangers and the strength they found in each other. Daniel, once a man content to live alone, had become a guardian, not just for Lily and Claire, but for the fragile hope they all shared. She understood now that kindness was not a weakness, but a shield. It was the courage to stand beside someone when the world turned its back. It was the gentle hand that lifts another up, even when weighed down by one's own burdens. And in that kindness, there was a quiet revolution, one that could unravel even the deepest webs of cruelty. Daniel joined her on the porch, wiping his hands on a rag, and smiled, a smile that spoke of resilience and newfound purpose. Claire reached out, their fingers intertwining naturally, a silent vow that whatever came next, they would face it together. Lily ran past them, chasing a butterfly, her carefree giggle a balm to their weary souls. Watching her, Claire felt a surge of gratitude, not just for the moment, but for the journey that had brought them here. The future remained uncertain. They knew the fight wasn't over, and shadows still lurked beyond the trees. But for now, in this fragile peace, they had found something rare and precious, a family forged by kindness, hope, and unwavering strength. And sometimes, that is enough. If you've been moved by Daniel, Claire, and Lily's story, please share your thoughts below. Do you believe a single act of kindness can change a life? Subscribe to the Heart Touch Stories for more heartfelt tales that remind us all of the power of compassion. Because in the end, it's kindness that keeps the world turning.